Chapter 241 3 Essence Revolutions Technique. He raised his hand and cast a floating technique on the golden page that had fallen in his hand, causing it to float many feet in the air, acting as a target. He then began to use small bursts of azure essence sword streaks to attack it bit by bit, eagerly gazing at the page which seemed to absorb all of the sword streaks like a bottomless pit. While doing this, Han Li had also tried to shoot an ice arrow towards it to see if that magic spell could also be absorbed. In the end, one arrow caused the page to go flying, ending Han Li's experiences with a fright. Instead, he obediently continued to shoot sword streaks into it. Han Li's azure essence sword streaks of the fourth layer should have been quite powerful, but the page had yet to respond as he was on the edge of exhaustion. Han Li bitterly complained as a result. He truly did not know whether or not all his hard work would go to waste if he didn't satisfy this page's absorption of sword streaks all in one go. Just as Han Li was conflicted about whether to proceed or stop, the page finally began to change, and the golden light on the page's surface exploded out. The page was no longer able to absorb the sword streaks. Instead, it began to reflect them, carving quite a few holes in the walls of the cave. Han Li repressed the excitement in his heart, and he watched the page's transformation without blinking at all. The light on the page slowly began to retreat and converged into words of light as large as ants. The page soon became densely dotted with golden light, like the stars in the sky, causing Han Li to feel great shock. Then, with a patter, the floating spell suddenly lost its effectiveness, and the golden page fell straight to the ground. Han Li, still in shock, instinctively and immediately stretched out and grabbed the golden page. But just when Han Li's fingers made contact with this item, it was as if the words of light had found an outlet and rushed in through that hand, fiercely channeling themselves throughout his entire body. Han Li was greatly shocked, and the color drained from his face. He hurriedly wanted to toss aside the page, but the page forcibly stuck itself onto Han Li's hand as if it were alive. Han Li was unable to shake it off despite his best efforts. The transmission of the words of light was just too fast. In an instant, all of the words of light had crawled all over Han Li. Glistening words of light covered Han Li's body from head to toe, appearing incomparably strange. Han Li was helpless and scared witless. Suddenly, the words of light appeared to have received a command and flocked toward his head. The countless words seeped into his brain in an instant, but because of the sudden rush, Han Li immediately held his head while screaming in pain. If the current circumstances continued for even a bit longer, Han Li's brain would most likely violently burst. Fortunately, the pain only lasted a short moment before the words of light all finished entering his head. Han Li then weakly fell to the ground and was unable to move in the slightest. After no less than the quarter of an hour, Han Li regained some of his spirit and was finally barely able to stand. Although the pain inside his head had greatly alleviated, buzzing still lingered, and his nerves were stretched thin. Han Li hurriedly climbed into the stone bed, closed his eyes, and regulated his breathing, allowing his mind to completely relax. Han Li meditated like that for 3 days and 3 nights. Not only did all feeling of discomfort disappear from his head, but he also figured out the reason behind the overflow of words of light. Azure Essence Sword Art. Furthermore, it was the complete magic art, all 13 layers without any gaps or lost sections. It could even be cultivated all the way until the legendary deity transformation stage without question. These were the words that were brought forth from the words of light. Just as Han Li started to receive this information, he was faintly shocked, but his face didn't show a shred of happiness. This was because of the supplementary cultivation technique at the very end, the 3 Essence Revolutions technique. At first, this piqued Han Li's interest, so he looked through it as he wished. After browsing the first few passages, he blankly stared for a moment. He believed that he had misunderstood, but after he read through that part several more times, he was convinced that he was not mistaken, causing Han Li to enter a state of raging ecstasy. This 3 Essence Revolutions technique actually possessed the miraculous, heaven-shaking effect of evading the core formation stage bottleneck. This information seemed like a voice from the heavens, causing Han Li to believe that it was a dream. Ever since he entered the world of cultivation, nearly every cultivator had talked about the problems of core formation. Everyone had sighed and shook their heads. All have said that breaking through to core formation was basically reliant on one's luck. It was a matter completely decided by the heavens. Naturally, those with excellent aptitude had already cultivated to the peak of foundation establishment and possessed the qualifications for core formation. In addition, those possessing heavenly spiritual roots naturally did not have any problems in this area. To be blunt, Han Li's confidence in achieving core formation was almost nil. With great difficulty, he spent all his life trying to find a way, so at this point, he was truly reluctant to give up. But despite this, Han Li was unwilling to so passively renounce the pursuit of eternal life merely because it was difficult. Even as hopeless as it was, his thirst for core formation and his will to struggle only grew stronger. But now, a straight path to core formation appeared before him, allowing him to bypass the bottleneck. How could Han Li not be in ecstasy? But regardless of Han Li's excitement, this cultivation art couldn't be considered a shortcut. In fact, it was completely unverified. The expert who created this cultivation technique and the Azure Essence sword art had long since reached core formation when he created these techniques, which he based on an insane idea about core formation. He stated at the very end of the cultivation technique that even if one completely followed the cultivation technique and fulfilled all that was required, the odds of immediate formation of a core was only 1/2. However, this was enough for Han Li. Even if one were to say only 1 in 10 instead of 1 in 2 odds, it would be enough for Han Li to pursue it without hesitation. But after Han Li's moment of ecstasy, he carefully analyzed the cultivation technique, and what he found decimated his hopes. Even if Han Li were a person with strong aspirations, he could not help but appear to have taken a direct blow, his face increasingly pale. Those cultivating the 3 Essence Revolutions technique obviously needed to first cultivate the Azure Essence sword art since this technique was originally founded on its basis. Although the Azure Essence sword art was extraordinarily difficult to practice, that was not the most important point. What caused Han Li's face to become unsightly was due to the meaning behind the technique's name. The individual must first cultivate to the 6th layer of the Azure Essence sword art, then disperse their sword art cultivation, after which they must cultivate all over again. According to its founder, only like this would someone be able to use the 3 Essence Revolutions technique. By repeating cultivating his magic power, his true essence would able to further compress and have his magic power become several times more pure. After doing this 3 times in succession and cultivating back to the peak of foundation establishment, he would be able to form a core in his Dantian with ease. According to this expert's conjectures, a gold core was originally created by solidifying one's true essence and condensing it. If the true essence was already solidified, forming a core would naturally be effortless. Even if Han Li felt that what this expert said was reasonable, he was truly hesitant to foolishly disperse his own cultivation. This wasn't because Han Li was scared of the hardship of regaining his lost cultivation, but rather because he wasn't confident that he would be able to cultivate 3 times within his lifespan. Even if he had the assistance of the small mysterious bottle, this was a matter of extreme risk. After all, according to the expert's plan, it would take longer and longer to cultivate as he would need to condense and compress his true essence more each time. The great benefits of doing this were, without a doubt, extremely great. It would allow him to have true essence and magic power several times greater than that of common cultivators, but at the same time, he would certainly be required to spend more time than common cultivators. With a trifling 200 years of life, would he be able to do all of this? Han Li truly did not know. After a moment of indecision, Han Li looked toward the golden page that he received from Li Huaiyuan. Only after an inspection of what it contained would he be able to come to a decision. As a result, an equivalent sword stream entered the gold page and was rewarded with an equivalent headache. Han Li experienced it once more, accepting the contents of the other gold page. Azure Bamboo Cloud's Warm Sword. This was what entered in Han Li's mind. Han Li became extremely interested and patiently arranged the words of light before pouring through it. It turned out that inside the gold page were actually instructions for how to refine a core formation flying sword magic treasure called Azure Bamboo Cloudswarm Sword. This wood attribute flying sword was actually quite similar to Han Li's gold beetle swarm blades, as it was refined as a set of magic treasures. At least 12 wood attribute flying swords were required to form a set. It was quite strange. Naturally, if he were able to collect enough materials and had enough true essence, he could theoretically refine 36 or even 72 as a set.